All right, we're all set up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our annual AIS Forum for the Clearwater River Watershed District. I'm Rebecca Carlson. I'm the district engineer and district administrator, and I'm going to give you a brief, just a brief intro for the project or for the proposals today, and then introduce our speakers first and some of our guests that we have in the audience. So if as I call out your name, maybe just give a little wave, and I'm going to call on the board members to give a little wave, the board member that's here, our CAC members that have joined us. So I see you have your cameras on, so just maybe give a little wave for people, and I'm going to call your names out. Our Lake Association chairs, we've got a couple of those present and past Lake Association chairs, and probably I'll call out James Johnson, who's joining us as well. We have lots of local AIS celebrities joining us today. So our first speaker is Shamek Bejer. He is the owner of Carp Solutions, who has been working with the Watershed District on aquatic invasive species, specifically management of rough fish, to improve water quality. He's a faculty at University of Minnesota, and I would say probably widely recognized as, are you the world expert, Shamek? Maybe? I kind of thought so. We're going to go with that for here. Steve, you're next. Steve McComas. Many of you know Steve as our starry stonewort expert who works with a ton of our lake associations. He's kind of the guy to go with for our starry stonewort. He is the founder of Blue Water Science, and he's been working on these starry stonewort infestations, the newly found ones in the watershed, and he's going to give a little presentation on that. I'm also going to call out Dale Holmeth. He is one of our board members. He lives on Lake Marie on the Stearns County side, and he is one of our board members. We're very lucky to have him. He has, not only having grown up in the area and being very familiar with all of the resources, he worked his whole career pretty much at the Department of Natural Resources. So a wealth of information for us at the Watershed District. He's been a great board member, and we're so happy to have him. Former board members, we have Kathy Johnsrud and Mary Ellen Wells, both on Cedar Lake. They were Wright County board members, and we thank them for their great service to the board. CAC, our Citizen Advisory Committee. If anybody wants to get a little bit more involved in the district, we have a very active Citizen Advisory Committee. These are folks that, volunteer their time and help us kind of take the pulse. We have events like this. We have basically the Annandale Expo and things like the Kimball Expo and Trade Show that was this last weekend. So we'll be at the Annandale one this weekend. And we do try to talk to people and get our finger on the pulse of what our residents and stakeholders want. But our CAC really supports us with that, and they're very active. So Rose Thielen on Nixon Lake and Greg Bartley on Lake Marie. Just a little raise of your hand if we're wave at people. Lake associations, I see we have, and if you registered late and I didn't scroll down because you don't all fit on the screen, which is great. I'm so happy that you're all here. Mike Elms is the new Lake Augusta Lake Association chair. And then Sue Wolf is the incoming chair for Cedar Lake. And then James Johnson, who many of you with the Lake Associations know him and have worked with him for your delineations and other work around AIS. He's also with Freshwater, and he has his own little business. So we've got a really great group, and I'm excited to have a conversation. I'm going to quit babbling. In addition to introducing everybody, the Watershed District is 50 this year. So this is our 50th year, and we're pretty excited and proud. And we'll be rolling out a couple of things. So who are we as a watershed district? We're about 160 square mile watershed district located in Meeker, Wright, and Stearns counties. We're founded in 1975, and we're one of the very few watershed districts that were actually founded first and foremost for water quality. Most were founded for flooding. Now we do work with flooding, but our primary goal was water quality. These are some photos of our data collection staff out in the field. So if you're seeing us out in the field, that's probably what you're going to see. Stop and say hi if you want. This is just a quick map to kind of show everything that we've got going on here. We've got City of Watkins up here, if you can see my pointer. Clear Lake on the west side, and the watershed flows from west to east through Clearwater up to the city of Clearwater at I-94, and the Mississippi River is a confluence. And then there's another little lake chain that comes through Cedar Lake into Clearwater and then out Grass and out the Clearwater River. Those little orange arrows are the direction of flow. So you can kind of get a sense of where you are. That's just the upper watershed to Augusta that we're showing draining into there. And the red lakes are the impaired lakes. I do want to point out 2 lakes that were taken off the impaired waters list, Lake Augusta and Union Lake down here. What do we do? Well, we monitor water quality in lakes and streams. We publish lake report cards. Those are on our website if you haven't seen them. We measure flow, lake levels, precipitation, so all of the hydrology. We have citizen precipitation recorders and citizen lake level monitors. So a shout out to any of you if you are here. Our citizen lake level and precipitation monitors are really critical to our hydrology and really understanding all the variability across our watershed. We do maintenance and operation on our water quality projects. We do education and outreach projects like this, and we do special studies, and we build and design projects, and we can also act as fiscal agents for aquatic invasive species. Just a super little bit of history, but around the time the Clearwater River Watershed District started, this is a map, you can just kind of see the outline. This is a historical SECI depth or water clarity. And this was the water clarity when it started. Our watershed district started and we started collecting data. So you can see all the red lakes. Those are the lakes that are impaired for clarity. So they've got a little algae bloom, kind of muddy. And then this kind of brighter blue is they're slightly clearer. And then this less bright blue is less clear. So that's when we started. We've built a bunch of projects, we've implemented a bunch of programs, and this is where we are now. So we've got a lot more, I'll say these were not sampled this past year, but they were all the same color as this bright blue. So we've got a lot more water clarity in our watershed right now than we had when we started. And then I'm going to stop my share and let Shanek share his presentation, that is very informative.
All right. Hi, everybody. Let me know. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yep, we can see it.
Can you see the full screen mode?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks a lot. Hopefully you'll see my arrow moving on the slides as a pointer. So I was told 15 minutes, so I'll get right into it. So this will be about common carp, right? About the assessment and some of the management we did in 2023 and 2024. So obviously Clearwater chain of lakes and Cedar chain of lakes. These circles around the lakes indicates the lakes that we were sampling. We actually did not sample Clearwater Lake, but we sampled the lakes upstream, Caroline, Marie, Louisa, Scott, Union, Betsy, and Clear. And then also on the Cedar side, we did sample Cedar, Swartout, Albion, and Henshaw. So we had multiple objectives for this initial phase of carp assessment and management. The first one was to estimate the population size, how many carp there are in each lake, and then to estimate their biomass density, pounds per acre or kilos per hectare, then see how big they were, and probably more importantly, how old they were, and I'll come back to that. The aging of the carp is very important. Look for juveniles, nursery sites, tag the carp that we were sampling when we do the surveys, a lot of the initial surveying involves releasing carp. So we tag every single one that we release so they can be used in future assessments. And then we're also looking at spring migrations, how much they move between lakes. And we tested a couple of removal methods. Okay, so the first assessment that we did was the population size and biomass. And for that, we use boat electrofishing. Oops. Okay, and the 100 kilograms per hectare is an important value to keep in mind. It's the threshold for carp biomass in lakes. In other experiments where we did carp removal in lakes, and other people also did similar work, we documented that if you have more than 100 kilograms per hectare of carp, then there's too many carp in the lake. If you have less than that, then they don't have a really significant impact on lakes. You can sort of see that on those relationships on the right-hand side. So this is aquatic vegetation in the lake versus carp biomass. As the biomass increases, you have less and less aquatic vegetation, and sort of the tipping point is right around 100. So 100 kilograms per hectare is our goal. You want to have less carp than that. So in this table, we are showing the results of both electrofishing surveys. So here are all the lakes listed in the Clearwater chain and in the Cedar chain. And the most important column is the biomass density, kilograms per hectare. Kilograms per hectare is almost equivalent to pounds per acre. It's almost 1-to-1. So we surveyed Clear that had no carp. We couldn't find any. Union, moderate biomass, 125. Betsy, relatively high, 183. Scott, 133. Louisa, Marie, Caroline, between 180 and 280. Keep in mind that those are first estimates we got for those lakes. These are confidence intervals. So they range quite a bit. And this is normal for those rapid assessment surveys. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is that in lakes that have truly lots of carp, you often see biomass between 400 and 600 kilograms per hectare. So some of these lakes obviously seem to be above 100, meaning they have too many carp, but they are not inundated with carp. And these are the surveys in Cedar chain. So we electrofish in Henshaw and Albion, and we found no carp. And I'm not saying that those lakes don't have any carp or this is typical. They probably winter killed before we did the surveys. Those are pretty shallow lakes. So in that particular year 2023, they had no carp. Swartwout also had relatively low biomass, 122. Cedar, I put ND, non-detectable, because in 3 days of electrofishing, we only saw 2 carp in the lake and netted none of them. So there is carp in Cedar, but very low biomass. Size structure, the carp are large, pretty much in all the lakes except for Swartwout. So on the right-hand side, you see the average weight in pounds, 14 pounds, 12 pounds, 15. Those are all pretty large carp on average. Swartwout was much smaller, 10.3. And we'll see in a second why. Another thing we looked at was the age structure. How old are the carp? And this is very important because if you can, collect carp from the lake and age them, you can look back at the entire history of the population going back decades. So how we do this is we remove inner ear bones from carp. These are called otoliths. And then they're sliced through the middle and examined under microscope. And if you look at them under microscope, you can see their annual growth checks like this, like tree rings, essentially. So if you're looking across the lake, there was some old carp in those lakes. Union, the oldest one, was 44, Betsy 44, Scott 40, Louisa 57, Marie 45, Caroline 58. So those are long-lived carp, but that's actually not a bad news. We did see some younger carp as well, from yearlings to 2-year-old, 8-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old. So pretty wide range of ages. Swartwout was different. The youngest one was 0, that means young of the year, and the oldest one was 14. This is just looking at the age distribution for those lakes. So Union, for example, the oldest one was 1. I mean, the youngest one was 1. The oldest one was over 40. So very wide range of ages. Betsy, there were some carp that were 7 or 8 years old, and there were some that were over 40. Louisa, almost the same. Marie, very similar. Caroline, very similar. Swordout was very different, the one on the right-hand side. The youngest one were 0, and the oldest one was, I believe it was 14. So much, much younger population. Now, this is important because what this means that, say, in a lake like Marie, it took the carp 40-some years to build up the biomass that they currently have, meaning that if you remove them, it's not very likely that they will come back very quickly because they just build up slowly over time. In lake like Swartout, it took them only 14 years to build up the biomass that they currently have, meaning if you remove them, they may be back, so relatively quickly. So managing those two types of lakes can be different. Okay, while we were doing the surveys, we're also looking for juveniles. This is an example of young of the year carp. We did not see any juveniles except in Swartout. So it matches our age estimates. Then we tested some removal methods. So we tried 2 different removal methods, and we were focusing on the lakes that had the higher biomass, obviously. So the first one we tried was a method that's called baited box net. The way this works is carp are social fish, and you can train them to aggregate using bait. We use cracked corn, which attracts carp selectively, and that method is used in the summer. And what happens is we select a few spots in the lake, we start baiting them, and in 4 to 5 days, the carp learn that the bait is there, and then it will go there to feed, and they can be removed. And like I was saying, this method is nice because it has very low footprint on the other fish in the lake because it only attracts carp. This is how this works. This is a typical box net. They're usually 30 by 60 feet in size. There's a net in the middle. They're placed in shore and shallow water. They're surrounded by metal posts with counterweights. There's a bait in the middle, and around the bait, there's an antenna that can scan for tagged carp. So whenever the carp show up to feed, that information is available online. So you can go and check the activity in the net, and you can figure out what's the best time to catch the carp. So when it's time to catch the carp, those weights are released, they fall down, the net comes up, and the carp are caught in the net. Some of these nets also had automated feeders that could be controlled remotely. And this is removal in 2023. We started with Betsy Lake because Betsy had relatively high carp biomass. So this was a pilot to see if that technique would even work in Betsy. So we installed 2 nets, and they were pulled 3 times. We removed 493 carp, which was approximately 6,200 pounds. And that was about 23% of the population. So we consider that a successful pilot, because if you can remove about, almost quarter of the population with 2 nets pulled 3 times, that's actually not bad. And the biomass was reduced from 183 to 140. So getting closer to that 100 mark, not quite there yet, but getting closer. We tried the same approach in Swartout, but it didn't work. We installed 2 nets and we baited them the entire summer, and there was basically no interest in the bait. There was no bait consumption, no carp detected on the antenna, so we didn't even try removing them because there was no point. In Betsy, we also tried commercial seining. That was last fall, 2024, because carp are known for forming offshore aggregations when the water gets cold. So the fishermen, local commercial fishermen, they pulled 2 seines. They caught 238 carp combined, 2,800 pounds, so a little bit less than in the box nets. We did more removal with box nets in 2024, and we first targeted Louisa and Marie because initial surveys suggested that those lakes also had carp biomass above 100. So we installed 4 nets in those 2 lakes, so 2 in Louisa, 2 in Marie, and they were pulled 4 times, so 4 rounds. We removed a 471 carp, which was about 20% of the population. There were large carp, so they weighed 5,800 pounds. And we recaptured 14 of the 60 some tagged carp in the lake. So that was actually not bad. It was relatively successful. And we were able to get a population estimate using mark and recapture, which is much more robust than boat electrofishing. And that suggested that we actually reduced the population from 102 kilos per hectare to 83. So those 2 lakes now are below the 100 kilo per hectare threshold. So that's good news. In Caroline, we installed 3 nets and pulled them 4 times, but that was less successful. We caught 370 carp, which was about 11% of the population, 4,300 pounds of carp removed. But we only caught 3 tags of the 35 tagged carp. So that's not enough to figure out exactly the biomass of carp that remains in Caroline. So Louisa and Marie, I would say that's pretty good. Caroline, not as successful. Also, the bait consumption in Caroline was much lower. And the final thing we did was tracking spring migrations. That was also 2024. The way this works is, as I was saying, the carp that we survey with boat electrofishing, they're tagged with those tiny little tags. We call them pit tags, and released. And then in the stream crossings between the lakes, we install those pit antennas. So whenever carp goes over the antenna, it is detected by a computer. We track migration in the sword-out system. So we put antennas upstream and downstream. And we also put a camera around the Ilsley barrier. And we detected no tags in that system and no carp on the camera. The situation was much different in the Clearwater chain of lakes. So here we had multiple pit antennas between Caroline and Marie, between Louisa and Scott, between Scott and Betsy, upstream of Betsy, and then below Clear Lake. And these numbers suggest how many of the pit tagged carp were detected at each site. So there was some movement from Caroline upstream towards the dam. There's a dam here between Caroline and Marie, so they cannot cross it. But 7 of the 30 carp were detected there. So that's relatively significant spring migration that could be exploited for removal in the future. Then there was a relatively significant migration from Louisa and Marie upstream, 14 tags detected. 3 tags were detected between Scott and Betsy. But the biggest one was upstream of Betsy, where 30 tags were detected. And almost 50% of the carp that were tagged in Betsy were all detected upstream at this site. So this could potentially be a significant site for future removal efforts in Betsy. I'll come back to it in a second. So when you have a situation where a lot of carp are moving through streams, you can put barriers or deterrent systems that block these migrations and direct the carp into traps, and you can remove them from those traps. We often use those low voltage pulsed DC carp barriers because they're non-physical, so you don't have to clean them and they don't cause flooding or they don't obstruct water flow, but they work very well for blocking carp movement and for directing them into traps and removal. So something like that could be considered for inlet to Betsy Lake. Okay, so to summarize, we have covered a lot of ground, collected a lot of data in the first 2 years. So we have pretty good understanding of carp abundance, size, age, and movement throughout both chains of lakes. We tested 2 removal methods, box nets and seining. Some lakes are already under the 100 kilograms per hectare and others are getting there. So Cedar Lake has very low carp biomass. Louise and Marie are at 83 kilos per hectare now after the box net removals. So they are below 100. The box nets worked relatively well in those systems. So I would say opportunistic removal could be pursued in the future. You don't have to be very aggressive controlling those carp, again, because they're old, long-lived fish. You know, there isn't a lot of evidence that they produce a ton of young in that system. But there's a method that you can use to continue reducing that population. Betsy, we drove that population down from 180 to 140. We recommend additional removal in 2025. You could consider the electric barrier upstream of that lake as well. That would be kind of like a long-term control method. Union and Scott, they seem to be slightly above the 100 kilos per hectare. They were in the 120 to 130 range. You could consider removal in 2025 or beyond. Again, the carp in those systems were quite old, so I don't think you need to be very aggressive controlling those carp, but overall, we would recommend additional removal. And the 2 lakes that puzzled us are Swartout and Caroline. I would just say that we would need more time and more effort to figure out how to control those populations. So that's all I have for now. I'd be happy to take questions.
We could take questions at the end, and maybe just Steve, do you want to get into your presentation?
Sure, I can do that. I have an old laptop here, so if it comes in and out, let me know. I'll just talk a little bit louder. But I might go to share a screen here and see what happens. I don't do this very often either. Can I? Oh yeah, I can do that. And I want to get this thing up right here. And I'll start this. How is that working? Can that be seen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then I am going to have to, let's do this. Is there any secrets here? I'll just do that. I want to share the screen, entire screen. And in the meantime, at any rate, while I am I have a little spinning circle here, the idea is that we're talking about Clearwater Lake and a new starry stonewort infestation. And what happened is that in the course of a point intercept survey, we found some starry stonewort way back in a back bay in a little area off the main lake. It was in some cattails, or it was kind of guarded by cattails and things like that. And you know what's happening here? It's not responding, so sorry about that. I will see what I can do. Well, we got that. Let's do this. I'll just go back and kind of start over here. And at any rate, the starry stonewort was found in about 1.8 acres. We delineated everything. And from there, you know what? I'm still getting this little circle thing going here. And we get that thing. So I apologize.
We have your presentation, Steve, so we'll just have Olive put it up.
Sure, why don't we do that?
Yep.
That'd be handy. Let's see if that doesn't work.
How's that?
You know what? I'll have to. Well, I apologize again. I probably have exited the whole Zoom program. So I'll be working from, I can work from my sheet. What What slide do we have up there? The first slide?
Yep, the first slide is up right now. You can just let me know when to
Yeah, let's go to
move
the
to the
next
next
one.
one. Okay. Oh,
So here's what we got. If I'm doing this correctly, we have a
Steve, can you still hear us? I'm going to let Olive and Steve coordinate on Steve's presentation. In the meantime, I'll just do the quick, if you two can get that worked out, I'll share my screen and do the quick legislative update. Does that work? Okay.
yep.
So I'll be brief with a little legislative update. We actually don't have a final piece of information for this now. But there is, many of you probably know this, that there's a projected roughly $6 billion budget deficit for 28 and 29, the fiscal years. We're looking at some federal cuts and some inflation rates that are not very clear and maybe not accounted for in the respective plans for facing the budget shortfall. And then we've got some local entities, basically state or local entities that are also facing significant budget shortfalls. For example, school districts on a local level. And then like the state grant system, which is administers grants for college-aged kids. The DFL and the Republicans each have, and the governor actually, all three have their own proposed budget cuts. But basically, the bottom line, I think, for all of it, and we don't actually know how it's going to handle, or how it's going to come out. Anything I would tell you today is probably going to change by Friday anyway. But we should, in the next couple of weeks, we should have more solid information. But the cuts required are significant. A lot of them are coming from education and health and human services that are proposed. The big issue that kind of affects us is that what we started in 2014, the funding of about $10 million a year coming through the counties to individual lake associations or watershed districts to do aquatic invasive species management, so that individual lake associations or individual lakes could get grants between $2,500 and $12,500 per year. That program is they're looking at cutting it, but 50% in each coming year and then phasing it completely out in 2029. I haven't seen any real strong push to keep it, just given some of the severity of the cuts required. But so it's a little bit remains to be seen here, but it's going to put several of our lake associations in a pickle. So I'll just give you a super brief. We have 6 lake associations, or 7 lakes under 6 projects, capital P projects under State Statutes 103D. What this means is that these lakes, the lake associations or residents petitioned the watershed district to initiate a project as formally defined under the state statutes that watershed districts work under. These projects are to manage aquatic invasive species. Some of them were started way back in 2005 for Louisa and Marie. Clearwater started all the way back in 1993. Several of these early projects were edited to or completely renewed to address all aquatic invasive species, not just the initial milfoil curly leaf issues. So, and just so we've been working with this, the watershed district essentially acts as the fiscal agent and levies the funds. There's a process, and I'll put up a little slide at the very end for you guys to see. But we're just the fiscal agent and the lake association members. We have several very savvy lake associations with very dedicated, very hardworking members that do a lot to save their neighbors a bunch of money, and that there's a lot of volunteer effort that goes in. And this kind of fits into, I tried to put a little presentation together. It doesn't have all of the data for our infestations, and some of the infestations are, the DNR date is not the date that it was actually probably there. It was just when it was actually put on the list. But just for Minnesota, keep in mind that, in 1977, we saw the first grass carp. 1987 was milfoil documented in Lake Minnetonka. I think we had it in 89 in Clearwater Lake. Clearwater is kind of usually the next one to get things. It's one of the bigger lakes. It's close to the metro. Back in the 90s, the DNR basically started their task force on aquatic invasive species. They had been reluctant to do so prior. There was a paper published in 1990 by two experts in the field. And essentially what they said was, after looking at a lot of the efforts and attempts to manage and eradicate your Eurasian water milfoil, that milfoil can't be eradicated. The legislature kind of stepped in 1991 and directed formation of a committee to manage aquatic invasive species. We saw our first bighead carp in Minnesota in 1996. 2008 was silver carp. 2011 was our Minnesota Carp Action Plan. And then MACER, which is the Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, was only founded in 2012. And then again, our funding that our lake associations rely on to manage aquatic invasive species started in 2014. And again, they're planning to phase it out as a result of budget cuts completely. So how do we move forward from that? Well, we have two lakes in our watershed district, Clear Lake and Pleasant Lake, that they have a lake association, and they set voluntary dues. And to date, they've secured funding either from the cities that that are near and close by. Some of the businesses have provided funding, and then they've also received grants. They've been very proactive about receiving grants. That's actually the same for all of our watershed districts. And then a handful of our lakes, like Clearwater, Louisa Marie, Bass, Cedar, and Augusta, all have capital P projects. So the projects basically are under petition. This is just a super quick. Residents submit a valid petition. You need 25% of the lake signatures and a bond for $2,000. And then we started that, forces us to go through a project or a process. I think Olive. Okay. Sorry, that was Olive just letting me know about our other presentation. So then we start a process that is dictated by state statute where we form these capital P projects. And then essentially what it is it allows us to act as the fiscal agent, get feedback and input from the residents on the lake association, and determine the benefits and the damages for the project. So it's a little bit like a ditch assessment process, but usually people are more receptive to these types of projects. And then the lake associations, like I said, generally run the programs. And they are annually, hiring people like James Johnson to do the surveys, people for general vegetation surveys, and people like Steve McComas for the starry stonewort surveys and other vegetative surveys. And then there's, the vendors and applicators too for the treatment. So let's see. So that is actually all I have. I'm believing that we've kind of lost, we've lost Steve, which is unfortunate. We will keep trying him and keep seeing if he signs in. But in the meantime, does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Hi, Nora.
Hi. I was just wondering if at some time you could just send out, since Steve, we couldn't hear his report, but if we could see his report, that would be good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like Steve is rejoining.
Yeah. Okay. Am I still sharing the screen, or how is the screen looking, everybody?
So we can't see it yet. Did you click the green share button at the bottom of your
Yeah, I
screen?
did. Oh yeah, I see. So what happened? I was offline. Do we still have a PowerPoint up there someplace?
I can share it from my screen.
Okay. You know what? Okay. Well, are we on the 2023 chart?
I can be. Can you see my screen, Steve?
No, I can't. So, apologize. Okay, that's it. This laptop is being is going to be upgraded here for sure. At any rate, what I want to do is go to the next screen, really, 2024, which is the Starry Stoneward activities for 2024. And that just kind of summarizes. You can see we wait 10 days or a couple weeks, go back and assess. And if then there is Starry there, we'll treat it again. There's a long time algologist who has been working with Starry Stonewort. His name is Dr. John Rogers. He said, we were talking to him, he was out in Lake Sylvia a while back too. He was saying that
Steve, I think you're frozen.
Okay, we've got some technical difficulties with Steve being online. So I guess we can just run through the rest of the slides and hopefully he can rejoin us and give us his expertise. Maybe we just try to do this and then he can join us for answering questions. Can you go back to the table? There were 4 treatments of 4.4 acres of the copper-based algicide. We also just want to let you know that we also hired Steve to survey the channel between Pleasant Lake and Clearwater Lake.
hey, there it is though. So I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
I went to my phone. This should be better. Hey, that's a good chart though. That's the chart I was looking for. And what's how long have I been offline? A few minutes?
Not too long.
I'm sorry. At any rate, 2024 can summarize what we've been up to. The yellow bars are treatments. We had 4 treatments last year and very good control by the end. But again, my experience is that we probably have not eliminated Starry, although that's the overall objective. We'll be back next year. By that I mean in 2025 to take a look and see where we are in this whole scheme of things. So with that, if we go to the next slide, I got a couple of slides left, and we'll be wrapping it up. We're kind of done with Starry for right now, but what we've done is we've been tracking zebra mussels around the lake as well. And anytime we do a plant survey, we're kind of looking to see if there's zebra mussels attached to plants. Here's a zebra mussel map of Clearwater, and it's pretty well. They're pretty much around the lake. That northern end of the lake, not quite as abundant in terms of its distribution. So that's kind of interesting. If we look at the next slide, that is a map that's based basically on dissolved oxygen and some other factors, and it gives us an idea where we might expect zebra mussels. Zebra mussels have been in the lake since 2015, and so it's going on 10 years we're going to start seeing some dieback on those zebra mussels. They've been pretty prolific. They've filtered out a lot of the algae. They're going to start starving themselves out, and so I would look for a possible decline in zebra mussels as we go forward. But they'll never probably ever be eliminated from the lake. But their density, their population can certainly go up and down. And then in the next slide, it's kind of a summary slide, and that is for curly-leaf, which has been typically pretty light in Clearwater. It's still present, some years bigger than other years. Eurasian milfoil is the same thing. It has been in the lake for, since 1989. That's going on, it's almost, 25 years plus, 30 years plus. And if it hasn't taken over now, the odds are that the Eurasian milfoil probably is not going to take over the lake. And then with zebra mussels, they were found in 2015. Their course of action typically is that they will become very abundant, filter out a lot of the edible algae, and actually start starving at some point. But they'll never probably go away. Starry stonewort is the newest. It's only been in the lake now a couple of years. We will hopefully continue to be persistent to keep it from, if we can keep it in that confined little back bay, treating 4 acres, that would be a big success. Unfortunately, Lake Coronis, they found starry stonewort in Lake Coronis at the point where it had already been distributed over 150 acres. It's now up to 900 acres in distribution. And so they're just managing as best they can the heaviest growth of starry. And it is a pretty expensive endeavor. But the last slide, we talk about just general lake conditions in Clearwater. The good news is that the lake clarity is pretty dang good. Aquatic plant diversity is also good. There's a lot of good things going on in Clearwater, and there's 16 fish species, and several of those species are above regional averages. And so the positives from Clearwater are that with a very active lake association, they've been proactive in a number of areas, and the AIS are in pretty good shape, they're under control, and the water quality, which is also very, very important, thanks in part probably to the watershed district, is also improving. So with that, maybe we'll go to a chat room someplace or sometime like that, but I'll hand it back over to y'all.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks, Shamak. At this point, we'll open it up to questions.
I'm trying to find the chat.
If you'd like to put your questions in the chat, or just raise your hand or just speak up. I'm going to share with you, this is actually 2023, but what Steve was talking about for history. The Secchi depth is the clarity, so you can see this is about when the zebra mussels were identified. You can see we have had pretty significant improvement in clarity since then. We've also continued to have a reduction in phosphorus and chlorophyll. So these are the phosphorus numbers back in the early 80s when the watershed district started. These were when a bunch of the projects were constructed. This was when we started kind of the next big round of projects. So we've had a continuous positive trend. I am not seeing any questions, so if we would for sure wrap early if nobody's got any questions, as it is sunny outside, and maybe y'all want to get out for a little walk. Fred, did you have a question?
Hey, Rebecca, this is Sue Wolf. Kind of interesting about the funding. So, how do the lake associations dial in on the reduced funding? Is that, do we impose an increased assessment to the residents on Cedar to make up, to make up some of the difference, or what are we going to do to manage that?
Yeah, I think
Because it
that's
sounds
really,
like it's going to happen.
it does sound like it's going to happen. Sue is the the new president of the Lake Association for Cedar Lake. Cedar Lake is one of the watershed district lakes that has a capital P project to manage aquatic invasive species under statute 103D. So every year we coordinate with the Lake Association pretty carefully to figure out how much they're going to need in a given year to manage their aquatic invasive species. I think we're running around 30 to 35,000 for a lake the size of Cedar in a typical year. And a good portion of that has been funded by grants from, through Wright County. The lake is in Wright County. Those are the DNR grants. And that is the source that is probably, going to be greatly reduced and then go away. So the options that we have are to, for lakes that have a project like you do, Sue, like Cedar Lake, you can look to just exactly what you said, increase the levy from year to year. I don't know that we've identified any other sources. I mean, if the state cuts funding, it's not like we're going to get money from the federal government. So it's really going to be left to the residents. It's kind of what the legislature and the governor are telling us.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer that made everyone happier, but.
Hey, Rebecca, it's Mike Charbonneau. I have a question, I think, for Shemek and maybe for the Watershed District as well. But Shemek, so the biomass numbers for Marie and Louisa were what, mid to high 200s, and then after netting, a more confidence level puts it in the mid 80s. So is there a timing or cadence of a follow-up measure to see if that number is accurate or stays in line, or how often should we be remeasuring that? And the follow-up for Rebecca and the team is, what is the 2025 plan from the Watershed District based on the results that have been presented?
Yeah, so I'll start with the carp question. So I'll back up a little bit. The first assessment that we do is the boat electrofishing, right? We call it the rapid assessment. And the way it works is you count the carp you catch per hour. And based on that, you figure out their number per acre or per hectare, and then you multiply that by their average weight to get the biomass. And in all of those lakes, Louisa, Marie, and Caroline, the catches per hour were actually not that high, but the biomass of those fish was high. And because of that, the overall estimate came out relatively high. Then in Betsy and in Louisa and Marie, we were able to do mark and recapture estimate, which gives you a much better population estimate. And all of those came down lower than what the electrofishing was suggesting, which is good news. So I would say I would trust more the most recent estimate, the mark and recapture one for Louisa and Marie, which suggests that you are, around 80 some kilos per hectare. If you ever do additional removal in those lakes, that estimate should get tighter, because that would involve tagging and releasing more fish and recapturing more of them in nets.
Great, thank you.
To talk about next steps, what we have discussed, we're actually hoping to get some feedback from the residents that attended this forum on what you'd like to see, so that we haven't solidified anything that we're going to do. But the plan right now is to look at another set of box netting for Betsy, and then some additional box netting, or basically feeding and trying to assess population in Sword Out Union and Scott Lakes. And there's 2 points I want to make. Our main goal, the main goal for managing carp, and why we manage carp and why we manage them specifically in the upper watershed, is to improve water quality. We've seen significant improvements, measurable improvements in water quality on our upstream lakes and our shallow lakes. So our investments there actually benefit all the lakes downstream. So the goal is, yes, we'd like to see carp populations decrease and the associated ecological benefits, fisheries benefits, macrophyte benefits of those, but water quality improvement, reduction in internal loading resulting from carp and other rough fish is our goal. So one of the points that I want to make is that at 100 kilograms per hectare is that value that Shemek gave us for kind of the tipping point for water quality. And when we're talking about, 4,000 or 6,000 pounds, these are lower pulls than we've had in the past. Many of you on the line will recall that we've pretty consistently done some carp management. Just the district has, relied on its own engineers and papers, published papers and things like that, and tried to do its own by doing pulls. We had at the upstream of Louisa and Marie at Highway 55, we had a fish barrier and a removal on Highway 55 that was actually taken out. And then we've done migration barriers and staining, and we've captured, in previous years, like 80,000 pounds in Lake Betsy. And we've seen really dramatic improvements in water quality. So now that we're getting down closer to that 100 kilograms per hectare, if you remember Shemek's graph where where it shows the slope of improvement, the carp biomass and plant coverage, there's a pretty good correlation between, the slope is a lot steeper. If you take out 4,000 pounds and you're very close to that 100 kilograms per hectare versus if you're well over the 100 kilograms per hectare. So for some of these lakes that we've seen in the down in the metro, the pulls that we have had wouldn't have had as big of an impact. Like they definitely be necessary to improve water quality. But the work that Shemek is doing is really dialing it in, and that's what we wanted, in terms of working with carp solutions, because we had kind of hit the end of what we felt like we could do without a real expert on our team. So the removals are pretty significant, and they're really focused on improving that water quality. So the watershed district managers will be making those decisions, and they'll look for the box netting and the surveys to happen in 2025. And then we will be looking at another barrier upstream of Betsy. We actually had a federal grant as part of the Kingston Wetland Restoration to put a fish migration barrier in at that very location in 2012, but we couldn't find a suitable location for the migration barrier. So we'll be looking at that upstream of Betsy now with Shemek and his team from Carp Solutions. And then it would be, I think, 3 to 5 years was the recommendation for Louisa for future population estimates. Was that right, Shemek? Did I get that right?
Yeah, and I was wondering if I could quickly reshare my slide to show the relationship you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully you can, whoops. Just go to full screen. Can you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is the relationship I think that you were mentioning. So as you can see, going from, say, 600 kilos per hectare to 400 is not expected to improve water quality almost at all. But then going from, say, 200 to 100 should improve it. And even going from 100 to 50 should accelerate it even faster. But this is looking at vegetation density and plant species on the bottom, because we use them as an index of what the carp are doing to the lake ecosystem, because they root in the bottom looking for food, so vegetation is the first thing they impact. And also hearing that you removed larger quantities of carp in Betsy in the past, and now both us and the commercial fishermen removed less, actually makes sense given how old those carp are. Again, Some of them were over 40 years old. So that means that you thin down most of them, and now, you know, it's sort of removing the final sort of chunk that should make a bigger difference in the lake. And again, because they're so old, I wouldn't expect them to come back really, really fast. I don't know if that makes sense, hopefully.
Yeah,
No,
no, thank you.
yeah.
And happy to see the results. We like what the numbers are. Just one other question. And I don't know where it might go, if it's with Watershed District or Shemek or DNR. But have you guys ever considered working with bow fishing groups? I mean, they're out on these lakes all the time. They're seeing the fish, they're seeing the populations, just sort of as an independent study or feel of what they're seeing lake to lake.
There are definitely people that do that all around. So, and some of them are, you know, relatives of some of our managers that have like a big boat with the lights, and one of them or one group of them is a contractor that we have that actually operates our carp migration barriers. So they know where the carp are and have been around Sport Out Lake and doing a lot of the bow fishing there. So it's been a little bit informal. We have talked about trying to do maybe a contest or something like that. But I know that there is also some use pressure between the folks who like to sleep in total darkness and folks who like to shine those big bright lights. So I guess I'd love your feedback on that. Would a contest be something you'd love to see, or would it annoy people?
Yeah, contest might annoy. I'm not sure. It's like anything. 9 out of 10 of them are fantastic, and 1 out of 10 has its lights 20 feet too far in the air.
Yeah.
I would just mention that from the ecological perspective, I think managing using bow hunting to manage carp in lakes like Louise and Maria especially, I think would make sense, because there's fewer and fewer carp in that lake. The water clarity is relatively good. So, if they remove even additional, I don't know, a couple hundred a year, if you do it for a few years in a row, I think you should see a positive effect. On the other hand, lakes like Swartout, I don't think that would be enough, simply because that's a carp nursery. There's a lot of juvenile carp being produced there, looks like during most years. So that would require much, much more aggressive management.
Semic, this is James. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Quick question. When you reduce the biomass, like in Maria and Louisa, you went from a little over 100 down to 83. Is that now that you have fewer carp, do those carp just keep growing and get back up to the biomass? Or are they kind of topped out at a certain age where removing it kind of locks in that biomass you have? And then related to that, is it better if you have 100 kilograms and it's 100 1 kilogram fish versus 10 kilogram fish? Is it better to have fewer carp and have the biomass and fewer carp? So those are the two questions for you.
The second one, I don't know. If it's better to have fewer bigger carp or more smaller carp. I would imagine that it's better to have fewer bigger carp. But the first one, I don't think that they will grow significantly in size because they're already so big. We did work in other lakes where the carp were initially, say, 4 or 5 pounds, and then you remove a lot of them and they get to 10 pounds on average. But once the carp is, say, 12 to 15 pounds, they just don't get much bigger. Keep in mind that carp, say females, lose 25 to 30% of their body weight as eggs every single year. So most of the growth that they do goes into gonads, both for males and females. So they don't really gain much body weight. They're already just at that sort of terminal size.
And we're at about 6:40. Anyone else have any burning questions? We've got a pretty fabulous group of aquatic invasive species professionals here in Shemek and in Steve and James.
Well, one thing I could maybe add on to from Brzezinski's discussion is I heard a talk a number of years ago from Brian Moss, who's doing a lot of work with carp over in England and looking at how disruptive they could be. He maintained that those energetic young ones were a lot more destructive than the big old carp who just kind of seem to kind of lollygag around. So Brzezinski mentioned that. I think they're both correct from what I can
Well, it's
get.
true with human juveniles too, I think, Steve. So I think that makes sense.
That could be too. Maybe any juvenile.
I just love knowing that there are carp older than I am in our watershed district lakes.
Older than the watershed district itself.
Good point.
Any last questions for our guests?
Mike had a question in the chat, and I think we kind of covered it, but I just want to double check. Mike, do you feel like your question was answered?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. No, I definitely covered. I didn't realize I was on screen. I just started clicking buttons here. So no, I'm totally satisfied with the answers and stuff like that.
Great.
Can I have a quick question for Rebecca?
Yes.
You mentioned the carp barrier location. Is that upstream of Betsy? Is that the plan currently?
Oh, it's for the location that you and I discussed.
Okay. Because I would mention that in the long run, if you have a site where a lot of carp move through, that often turns out to be the cheapest way to control them in the long run, because the carp are kind of like salmon. They're born in certain places, meaning some marshes or shallow lakes. And then as they grow up, they spread out to different lakes. But when it's time to spawn, they will go back to the place where they were born. So even if you remove half of them, they will just keep running to the same place. And because we were seeing so many carp moving through that site upstream of Betsy, which included Betsy carp and also Louisa and Marie carp, if you invest in infrastructure at that site, then in the long run, carp removal becomes a little bit more affordable because, they do most of the work for you. They already aggregate at that site year after year.
Yeah. That's what we'd like to see. I would predict, just based on the lake response modeling that we've done, basically the lake's response to nutrient inputs, that we would see a measurable improvement in much of the chain. We're really low down in Clearwater, Augusta, Carolyn. We've got pretty robust water quality numbers down there. But I would imagine that we would for sure see a measurable improvement if we were to aggressively, manage with the barriers. Like I said, we had back in the 80s, we put in a physical fish migration barrier and a fish trap on Highway 55. So it would have been on the south side of the road, just upstream of Lake Louisa. And that operated for 20-something years, 30 years. I don't know. It was just removed. The DNR isn't partial to having obstructions across the channel. So that was something that we did in the early 80s, and it was effective. We removed a lot of carp there, but it just became really dangerous to operate, and it was not, the DNR didn't love it. And then, like I said, our grant, we couldn't, I think that back in 2012, the electrical, the low voltage meters or the low voltage barriers were, I think they were just more expensive when we were looking at it. We were going to look at putting in another physical barrier. But again, we just couldn't find a location. But I think with the electrical barrier that Shemek is talking about, and the pretty low footprint, and the costs have come down that I think it'll be a really robust treatment. I'm actually really excited about that. And I'm really excited about what we've pulled out of Betsy so far.
Yeah, that barrier technology was not even around in 2012. That's a technology that was developed in Europe around 2016. So it's been around for a few years, and it's been used, for example, to manage sea lamprey around the Great Lakes. And I think back then you were probably looking around at the older type AC fish barriers, which is, let's just call it the older technology, which is usually more expensive. But the things have changed. We have new technology now.
So, and that is why that we wanted to work with Carp Solutions, and we'd like to bring in people who are experts in their field and give us the best possible outcome and benefit value for our dollar that we spend on water quality. So.
Rebecca, this is Shelley Binsfeld. I have a question.
Hey, Shelley, what's up?
Okay, so I'm on the AIS, DNR AIS Advisory Council or committee, and also with the SWCD and on the board there and with the AIS task force there. And one of the questions we keep trying to think through and so forth is how much to invest in prevention versus maintenance. And so I'm wondering what your watershed district's philosophy on that is, or if you guys either what you have done or what you might do, because especially as there would, most likely there's going to be less funding and you're really going to have to make some tight decisions. Do you think you would go more towards prevention or maintenance? And this is more about vegetation, AIS and vegetation area.
Yeah, and I think, Shelley, it's a really good question. And I was going to say, sadly, everything's connected, but maybe that's not as sadly. We really depend on our neighbors. So I think overall, the education pieces of it that we have to do statewide are still really important. Some of the decontamination stations, we've had success with those. Unless you completely lock down a lake, you need a combination of both education and prevention, monitors people to watch the lake access points. We right now have been really leaving that up to the residents. So they're out there, they're on the lake, they see who's coming to the lake access points. So the individual lake associations for right now are making those decisions, and our reports basically allow them to spend that much money. So they are going to get feedback on a very hyper local level from their lake association members to say, hey, we're spending too much. Hey, we're not spending enough. This is what we're seeing. Here's what we want to see. So they make those decisions on a hyper local level, which, I really like to see. I think it's generally it best serves the group of people. However, the local residents aren't the only people that have an impact on aquatic invasive species. As we know, it's a statewide spread issue. So that was not a really succinct or even an answer to your question, Shelley, but I guess it kind of depends on the thing the scary thing we're trying to prevent. When it's starry stonewort, people get really upset and really nervous. If it's other, people aren't too concerned about the zebras anymore. So
okay,
really didn't answer the question.
That was really helpful, because what you really said is that instead of a statewide making that decision, it really should be the local decision of you have this much money, you choose which way it's going to be used, versus us as a AIS state program, DNR, saying, okay, we're going to focus more on prevention, or we're going to focus more on maintenance. We really shouldn't do that statewide. We really should allow the local people to be making those decisions for what they're really needing right there. That's what I'm hearing from you.
It seems to be working in our lakes, but I would venture a guess maybe we can hear from some of our lake association. We've got some of our heavy hitters on the lake associations here today, so maybe we can hear what you guys would think. And I will be interested to see how our project funding is allocated and goes. So for a lake like a Cedar Lake, they spend a fair amount, I would say, more on prevention than they, and they definitely manage, but they really kind of go, just say that, yeah, they do really a robust prevention program as well. So I will be interested to see how those programs look, what funding they request for the next fiscal year, and to see how it changes. That might be an interesting thing to watch with all of our programs and projects.
This is Dave Glass from Cedar Lake. We've been chatting with one of our other members about this. We have the option with the Big P project, as you said, to increase residents' taxes. We also can ask for voluntary contributions. We can also redetermine what the feel is on the lake for how much people want to pay or can pay anymore. And you can't ask for contributions just from the people who have all the money. It's not fair to that either. And then as a lake association, you have to decide, okay, we only have X dollars. Do we cut back on monitoring on the lake? Do we add more monitoring? There's only so much money that goes around, and I don't think we can count on any money coming from the state anymore or the federal government. It looks like for the next few years, things are going to be more expensive. Inflation's not going to be cut down. I mean, even if all these plans work, it's going to take time for everything to go through the pipeline. So we're on our own. And I think locally, that's going to be the way it's have to be decided, because we're the only ones who are going to have a say in it. If the state gives you no money, they can't really tell you what to do. Wright County can help, but if you can't give us grants, it makes it harder. So I think it's just going to be a readjusting of how we spend money, and it's going to take a few years to figure this all out again. I think and it's going to be in all sorts of different things that we do. It's not just our lake. It's going to be a lot of things that we do. We're going to have to, unfortunately, change the way we spend and change our expectations, I believe. I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you, David. Any other lake association folks care to weigh in? So Shelley, you've got someone that's advocating here and really actively serving at a state level. So I encourage you to bend her ear.
It just seems like this is Sue Wolf from Cedar Lake. It so much has been already invested, and it is very concerning that, without the funding, I think we're going to need the watershed to help us with the risk assessment and helping us prioritize as well, because lake associations do great, but they're run by volunteers, and we're going to need guidance if there isn't money to help us prioritize, so that, if we've got to do things different, okay, but help us to do the right things so that we can, maintain the lake as we have. As I think, Rebecca, you suggested at one point, Cedar has had over $1 million already invested in it. We don't want to lose that without the funding.
It's a really good point, Sue, about the risk assessment and guidance. It's definitely going to be a lake by lake risk evaluation.
As far as Lake Augusta, our biggest challenge has not been money as much as it has been the DNR not allowing us to do treatments. We do the surveys, we find this curly leaf or the Eurasian milfoil or whatever, and then we submit our permits and they come back and say, oh, we didn't find any, or it's, where you ask for 6 or 8 acres to be done, we'll give you half an acre or 1 acre. So we found the DNR to be less, more of a stumbling block for us than it is actually the money.
Okay. Thank you,
Becca,
Mike.
this is Greg Bartley.
Hey, Greg.
Louisa and Marie have had, I think it looked like on your chart, the longest Big P project on AIS with our Curly Leaf project started in 2005. And for us, the yearly assessment, sharing it among all the property owners on the lake, those are the ones who get the most direct benefit, has been wildly successful, I think, in that it seems to be fair. People don't object to it, but one of the things that we try to do as Lake Association every year is very clearly show how that money is being spent. We communicate at all of our meetings. We've talked about it in newsletters, and we rely on the measurements that the Watershed District has made of better water quality over the years to justify it. And so in that sense, maintenance has been the biggest focus that we've had. But when stormwater came along, prevention started to raise its head. And so for the last 2 years, we've been funding our inspection program at the launch. And I don't see that going away unless, well, I guess if we catch stormwater, maybe we don't need to keep checking anymore. I don't know. But I think having it at the local level and how you spend that money is really critical.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I will say, Shelley, I can look at these as a practitioner, a water quality person, water natural resources person. And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, I feel like the residents catch stuff, or the residents have insights about the use and the risk. So it's really kind of us coming together and trying to evaluate that. And it's not me coming and telling them, it's a discussion where we talk about the science and the engineering and the costs and their values and their expectations. And as David pointed out, it can become a fiscal hardship for folks to pay some of these. So we got to listen to that too. And I think our board chair and our board, since I've worked with them since 2000, the message has always been, we're here to help people. And we've got our goals around water and natural resources. But it's really that focus on helping people.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts. You really spurred some more things in my mind, and I'll definitely bring it back to the AIS committee when we meet monthly. So this is just really great to see you guys gathering together like this, and how organized it is, and just the support you're getting technically too from the Watershed District. So thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Shelley. Appreciate it. Any last minute questions? We're at about 5 minutes left, and I want to let you guys get out for your evening walks if you would like to do so. Going once. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It was really nice to, I didn't see everyone's face, but it was nice to see all the names come up, and I'm happy that you guys were able to join us. And again, thank you so much to Shamak and to Steve, and for every one of you guys for showing up so regularly for this Watershed District. Really appreciate it.
Rebecca, thank you for all you do. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Susan. You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.